You have to understand, in a town like Sutton, Indiana, Halloween wasn't about terror. It was about tradition. The kind that smells of candied apples and wood smoke. It was the one night a year we let the dark feel friendly. We carved grinning pumpkins, hung cardboard skeletons, and told ghost stories about the lady in white on Creek Road. We did all that so we wouldn't have to talk about the real ghosts. My name is Elias Vance. My family has lived in Sutton for 5 generations. We are the keepers of the soil, my grandfather said. He never specified what was buried in it, what seeds of hatred were planted long before we were born, and what bitter harvest they yielded. This is the story of that harvest. The Halloween I stopped being a boy and started seeing the cracks in my town's perfect, folksy paint. It began with a high school history project. Mrs. Albright, a teacher with a spine of steel, told us to dig beyond the town's brochure. Find the story nobody tells, she said. My best friend Liam and I, we thought we'd be clever. We went for the town's oldest ghost story, the Cobb Creek hangings. The tale was that 100 years ago, outlaw brothers were strung up for cattle rustling. Their ghosts still haunted the woods. It sounded like a perfect, spooky project. We had no idea we were about to pull a thread that would unravel everything. Our first stop was the Sutton County Historical Society, a dusty room in a library basement run by old Mr. Henderson. When we told him our topic, his face tightened. The air grew heavy. The Cobb Creek matter, he rasped. Not suitable for boys your age. Folks don't like that story dug up. It's messy, but we had a permission slip. Reluctantly, he led us to a heavy oak filing cabinet he unlocked with a key from around his neck. The file he handed us was thin, suspiciously thin. There were no outlaw brothers, no cattle rustling. There was a single yellowed clipping from the Sutton Sentinel, dated October 31st, 1924. The headline was small, tucked away on page 4, as if ashamed of itself. It read, "Asterisk, asterisk, Negro man meets his end at Cobb Creek. Body removed, asterisk, asterisk." The article was 3 sentences. It said a man named Isaiah Campbell, a farmhand from Indianapolis, had been dealt with by parties unknown after being accused of making improper advances towards a white woman. The sheriff had disposed of it appropriately. That was it. No trial. No names. Just 3 sentences to end a man's life. Liam was confused. This isn't the outlaw story. This is different. But I couldn't speak. I was looking at the microfiche reader, where Mr. Henderson had left a different reel loaded. It was a front page of that same newspaper from that same day, October 31st, 1924. It was a vibrant advertisement for the Sutton Halloween Carnival. A pie-eating contest, a bonfire, a parade. It spoke of community, of fellowship. On the night a man named Isaiah Campbell was lynched, our town was throwing a carnival. The disconnect was a physical blow. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a lynching. And my town had celebrated around it. That night, Halloween felt different. The grinning jack-o'-lanterns looked like grotesque, mocking faces. The skeletons in the trees had a new, horrifying weight. As we trick-or-treated, my bag filling with candy, I could only think of Isaiah Campbell. Did he have a family? What was his voice like? The article had erased him. We ended up at the woods near Cobb Creek. The supposed site. The wind rattled the bare branches like bones. This was where the town's teenagers came to scare themselves. Tonight, it felt sacred and haunted. Liam shivered. This is creepy, man. Let's go. It's a downer, but it's history. It's over. But it didn't feel over. The wind seemed to whisper. I knelt, my hand brushing the cold, damp earth. This was where it happened. Right here. I felt a desperate need to reassemble Isaiah Campbell, to pull him out of those 3 cruel sentences. That's when I saw it, half buried in the leaves, glinting in my flashlight beam, a small, tarnished piece of metal. A button, and etched into its surface, worn with time, was a single, elegant letter. C. Campbell. My heart hammered. A coincidence, surely. But holding it, I felt a connection across time. This wasn't just a story. It was evidence. The next day, we confronted Mr. Henderson with the button. The old man looked at it, and the last of his resistance crumbled. He sighed. a sound of immense weariness, and went back to his cabinet. This time, he pulled out a small leather-bound journal, his grandfather's diary. Silas Henderson was a town clerk in 1924. "My grandfather was not a brave man," Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling, "but he had a conscience. He told me, 'The truth has a weight, boy. One day, it will be too heavy for one man to carry alone.' I suppose that day is today." We took the journal, our hands shaking. The script was a tight, spidery cursive. The story it told was horrifying. Silas wrote of the ugly fever that took the town. Abram Fletcher, a powerful man, had flown into a rage after his daughter, Eleanor, was seen talking to Isaiah Campbell. It wasn't an advance. Isaiah was a carpenter fixing their fence. Eleanor brought him a glass of water. They spoke. That was a crime. Silas wrote of the whispers, the gathering at the saloon. He wrote of the Halloween carnival being used as a cover, a diversion. While children bobbed for apples, a mob of 30 men whose last names I knew, names of my classmates, put on masks, rough sacks with eye holes. They dragged Isaiah from his shed and took him to Cobb Creek. Silas did not go. He stayed in his office, listening. He wrote the most chilling sentence I have ever read. Asterisk, I can hear the carnival music, a gay tune, and beneath it, the sounds of men becoming beasts. It is a terrible symphony, and I am its most loyal and most cowardly audience. Asterisk, he didn't describe the act. He didn't have to. The horror was in the details. The way the music suddenly stopped, as if the town had taken a breath. The long, silent pause that followed. And then, the music starting again, louder, more frantic, to drown out the silence where a man's life had been. At dawn, Silas went to creek. The mob was gone. The carnival was over. But tucked into Isaiah's trousers was a small wooden bird, crudely carved. A toy. Silas took it, and a single brass button torn from Isaiah's shirt. He buried the button and kept the bird. The Outlaw Brothers' story was a fiction invented within a week. A story to sanitize a lynching into a Wild West tale. A story to protect the good names of the men who did it. A story my town had been telling for 100 years. We had our project, but it was an exhumation. Liam was terrified. Elias, my great-grandfather. His name is in this journal. He was there. What are we supposed to do? The weight was immense. These weren't abstract figures. They were the people I saw at the grocery store. We had to finish it. We had to find Isaiah's family. It was a long shot, but we found a thread online. An archived black newspaper from Indianapolis. The Freeman's Call. An obituary for Isaiah Campbell. It described him as a devoted son, a beloved brother, a skilled carpenter. He was 24. It mentioned his family's grief and their anger at the whitewash of justice in Sutton, and it listed his surviving relatives, including a sister named Grace. Then the miracle, a modern-day phone listing for a Dr. Grace Campbell Williams in Indianapolis, a professor of African American history. With a trembling hand, I called. I stammered out who I was, about the journal, about the button. A long, heavy silence. Then her voice, thick with emotion. My grandmother was named Grace. Isaiah was her older brother. She never stopped talking about him. She said he could whistle any tune and carve little birds for her out of scrap wood. She died with his name on her lips. We've waited a long time for someone from that town to say his name. The following weekend, Dr. Campbell Williams came to Sutton. We met in Mrs. Albright's classroom. She was a tall, regal woman in her 60s, with eyes that held a century of sorrow and strength. We laid it all out. The clipping, the journal, the button. Liam, pale but determined, showed her the page describing the carved bird. She listened, her hands folded. When we finished, she opened her purse. She took out a small, faded photograph. A young man with a kind, hopeful face, smiling, strong forearms. "This is Isaiah," she said. "The man, not the victim." Then she took out a small wooden object, wrapped in a soft cloth. A bird, its wings rough-hewn but graceful. The exact bird from Silas Henderson's journal. My grandmother kept this her whole life. It was the last thing he made. He was going to give it to her when he came home for Christmas. Seeing them together, the button from the ground where he was killed, and the bird he never got to give was devastating. The full circle of life, brutally interrupted. The climax was the presentation. The day before Halloween, the school auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, the mayor. We saw Mr. Fletcher. We saw Liam's grandfather. We began not with the lynching, but with the carnival. We put the cheerful front page on the screen. Then, slowly, we layered the truth over it. The 3-sentence article, the journal excerpts. We didn't shout. We didn't accuse. We just presented the facts, letting the dissonance build. Then, we introduced Dr. Grace Campbell Williams. She walked on stage, a calm, powerful presence. She didn't talk about anger. She talked about her great-uncle, Isaiah, his love for woodworking, his dream, his devotion. She held up the photograph. And for the first time, Sutton saw the face of the man they had murdered. She held up the little wooden bird. "This is what was taken from him," she said, her voice clear and steady. "A future, a life, and this is what was taken from you. Your humanity, your truth. A town that can celebrate around a lynching tree is a town that is already haunted. You've been living with a ghost for 100 years, and you didn't even know his name." The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the projector. I saw Mr. Fletcher stand and walk out, his face a stony mask. I saw Liam's grandfather lower his head into his hands. There was no applause, only a heavy, profound quiet, the sound of a foundation cracking. The aftermath was complicated. Some called us heroes. Others said we'd shamed the town, stirred up trouble best left buried. Liam's family didn't speak to him for a week. We got dirty looks. But something had shifted. The next Halloween, the carnival was quieter. The skeletons didn't seem as funny. And a group, led by Mrs. Albright, erected a small, simple memorial at the edge of the woods by Cobb Creek. A smooth, black stone bench. Engraved on it is a name, Isaiah Campbell, 1900 to 1924, and beneath it a single line, "Truth is a harvest of a just field." Sometimes I stop there. I sit on that cool, hard bench. I listen to the wind in the trees, the same wind that blew on that terrible night a century ago. It doesn't feel haunted anymore. It feels reconciled. The ghosts weren't in the woods. They never were. The ghosts were in the silence, in the stories we told to avoid the truth, in the comfortable traditions that papered over a screaming history. We took away Sutton's friendly dark, the Halloween. We forced it to stare into the real dark, the one it had created. And in doing so, we didn't create a new ghost. We finally, after 100 years, laid one to rest. The real horror wasn't a spooky story. It was a town's capacity for evil, and its even greater capacity to forget. The real justice was in remembrance, in speaking a name that was meant to be erased, in returning a carved bird to its story. So this Halloween, when you see a skeleton in a tree, remember that for some, that is not a decoration. It is a history. When you hear a ghost story, ask what it's hiding. What truth is it too afraid to tell? Because the past isn't dead and buried. It's not even past. It's right here in the soil beneath our feet, waiting for someone to care enough to dig it up. Subscribe for more powerful stories that explore the hidden Halloween histories and social truths that shape our world. And